This is 7th grade. We're starting lesson 1.5. Looks a little bit out of focus. That's a little better. This is on page 33. So we're adding and subtracting rational numbers. Really, all we're doing is adding and subtracting, rational numbers, but this is what you guys have just learned how to do. I'm not going to worry about these examples. You can look at these on your own. Let's look at the bottom of page 34. And I'm looking at the triad. It says the dolphin is at the surface of the water and then descends to a depth of 4.5 feet. Then the dolphin swims down another 2 3/4 feet. What is the location of the dolphin relative to the surface of the water? So the dolphin starts at the surface of the water and then goes down 4.5 feet. And so they have that marked right here. That's a negative 4.5 feet. Okay. Minus what? 2 3/4, 2 3/4 feet. So, the next box down, it says a negative 4.5 feet plus, and then we would put it in parentheses, a negative 2 3/4 because the dolphin went down. So you're adding these two negative numbers. Now, hopefully everybody remembers, I should grab some sticky notes here, how to add mixed fractions. It's kind of easy in this case. Let me move that. So we have 2 3/4 and 4.5. So I'm not gonna worry about the negatives right now. So I'm gonna write 4.5, and then 2 3/4, 2 3/4. Okay, and we're adding those together. Keep in mind that they are negatives that we're adding together, so when we're all done, we'll just change it to a negative. So the first thing I need to do, raise your hand if you remember how to do this. Really? Okay, so very few. All right, first thing we need to do is find a common denominator. So we're looking for a number that both 2 and 4 will go into evenly. Well, that number is obviously going to be 4. Then I look at this and I say to myself, 4 goes into 4 once, and then 1 times 3 is 3. And that makes sense because if the common denominator is 4, this isn't really even going to change. Now, for this one up here, 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 times 1 is 2. And now all we do, and again, since we're adding these together, you add the numerator. That's the number on top. So we're adding the 2 and the 3, which is what? 5. The denominator stays the same, and that's 4. Then we also add the 2 and the 4 here, which is 6. So here we have a mixed number, 6 and 5/4. But we're not done. How many times does 4 go into 5? It goes in once with 1 left over. That would be 1/4. And then I take that whole 1 that fits into 5 and I'll add it to the 6. And you end up with 7 and 1/4. But finally, don't forget, it was 2 negatives that we were adding together. So the answer would be a negative 7 and 1/4. So it says the location of the dolphin relative to the surface of the water is a negative 7 1/4 feet. All right, I'm not going to worry about that. And you can scratch out the convince me. I'm not worried about that. Questions on that? No? Okay, let's look at example 2. You guys can look at that on your own, but let's look at some of the triads here. I'm going to grab another sticky note. So let's look at the triad here for A. So what do we have here? It says find the sum of the difference of the rational numbers. So we have a negative 2.5 plus a negative 5 6/10. So when you have a problem like that, the first thing you need to do is decide if you want to convert them both into fractions or both into decimals. And it doesn't matter. You'll end up with the same correct answer either way. But just for grins, I'm going to change the 2.5 into a fraction. So what would be a way of, let me pull a stick here, of changing well, 2.5, Mr. Meredith, into a fraction? What would that be? Yeah, and I actually said it earlier here. So that's going to be negative 2 1/2. So we have a negative 2 1/2 plus another negative, negative 5 6/10. So I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to put 2 1/2. And then I'm going to put 5 6/10. Okay? They're both negative, but for the purposes of what I'm doing here, I'm just going to add them together and just remember, like I did in the earlier problem, that the answer is going to be negative. So I need to find a common denominator that both 2 and 10 will go into. Mr. Wise is not here. Miss Brewer, what's the number that both 2 and 10 would go into evenly?
I don't know, my brain's not bringing me to that.
Okay. Mr. Quayler? 10. Okay. 10 goes into 10 once, and 1 times 6 is 6. Just like before, it's going to stay the same. 2 goes into 10 5 times, and 5 times 1 is 5. Now, I'm just adding these together, and you add the numerators. So I'm adding the 5, and I'm adding the 6, and that's going to be 11 over 10. And the 5 and the 2 is 7. So here we have an improper fraction, just like before. The numerator, which is what's on top, is larger than the denominator. So I see how many times the bottom will fit into the top. It fits in once with 1 left over. So what's left over is 1, so it's going to be 1/10, and then I'm going to add that 1 to the 7. It becomes 8. And so the answer to this one is 8 1/10. But don't forget, we're adding 2 negatives. So it's going to be a negative 8 1/10. Okay? Questions on this, anybody? No? Okay. So there's A is done. I do want you to do B and C also. Let's look at C for a moment. I'll help you guys out with that one. All right? And again, 1 is a fraction, and 1 is a decimal. And you have to decide, gosh, should I convert them both to fractions or both to decimals? In this case here, I think I'm going to convert the fraction into a decimal. And we have a negative 135.4. So I'm just going to write this down, 135.4. Okay? And we're adding a positive 78, and I'm going to change this into a decimal. And so if I was to draw a number line, here's 0. A negative 135 is going to be way over here. Negative 135.4. And I'm adding a positive 78. That's less than 100. So I won't get all the way back to 0, but I will be moving in this direction. So really, all I need to do is figure out the difference between the two. So I'm just going to subtract the 78, and I'm going to change this into a decimal. I'm going to put 78, and 1/2 is 0.5. I'm going to subtract that from the 135.4. And can I take 5 from 4? No, so I have to borrow. The 5 becomes a 4. That becomes 14, so this becomes a 9. The decimal goes straight down. Can I take 8 from 4? Nope, I've got to borrow again. This becomes a 2. That becomes 14. 8 from 14 is what? Let me pull a stick here so you're just paying attention. Miss Lamondola, what's 8 from 14?
Doing the math. 4. Wait. 6.
6, okay. So that's 6. Can I take 7, Miss Lamondola, from 2? Nope, got to borrow again. That becomes 0. It becomes a 12. What's 12 minus 7? Miss Lamondola? 5, you got it. Okay. All right, so 56.9. That's where we would end up, 56.9. But don't forget, we're dealing in the negatives here. So this answer here is a negative 56.9, and I'll circle that one. So in many of these problems, I do want you to do number B, but you can do that one on your own. You guys have to decide, gosh, would it be easier to convert it into a fraction or into a decimal? I'll let you look at example 3 on your own. I'm not worried about it. Yeah, I'll circle to try it. I want you guys to do that one. Let's see here. So turn to page 36. Let me get that focused. So number 1 here, it says how are adding and subtracting integers related to adding and subtracting other rational numbers? Well, I pointed it up here. So just write this down for number 1. Number 2 I circled, and number 3 I scratched out. 4, 5, and 6. Circle those for 6, A and B. Let's look at 4 for a moment. It says, what is the distance between the top of the fishing pole and the fish? So the top of the fishing pole, well, let's see here. Looks like here's the water, the top of the water. So stop the noise, thank you. All right. And it looks like the top of the fishing pole is 8.5 feet above water. And the fish is 4.5 feet below the water. And it says, what is the distance between the top of the fishing pole and the fish? So you want to know what this from here to here is. So let me pull a stick here. Mr. Moore, what would you do?
You would do 8.5 minus 4.5.
Yeah, and that.
Negative.
Yeah, that's what you would think, but we're talking about distance, and it goes back to that absolute value concept. So let me show you something here that this might help a little bit to think about it in a different term here. Here's 0, okay? Let's say right here is 5, and let's say right here is a negative 15. If I ask you or anybody else, what's the distance between those two, the answer is going to be positive because we're just measuring between negative 15 and 5. So what's the distance between those two? How far is it from here to here? Yeah, exactly. It'd be 20 inches or feet or whatever it is. So it's kind of the same thing here. They're just asking what the distance is between here and here. And like you did, you just added those two together. You didn't worry about the negative sign. You just added them together. And so it's the same thing here. You're going to add 8.5 and 4.5. Well, let's just do what's 8 and 4. That's 12. What's 1/2 plus 1/2? That's 1. So it's going to be 13 feet. Okay? So think about that depending on how they word the question. Sometimes they're asking the difference between 2 points. And if it's distance, you're just going to be adding them together. All right? And sometimes you're going to be adding negatives and positives, sometimes adding positives and positives. Sometimes the question will be about distance. If it's distance, it's going to be a positive answer. They're asking how far it is. Just like if I was, let me draw another one here. Let's say here's 0, okay? And here's negative 1. And right here is right here is 3, positive 3. If I wanted to know the distance between negative 1 and 3, Miss Keith, how far is it? It's 4, because you're just adding the 1 and the 3. That's 4. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Makes sense, you guys? All right. So 6, A and B, mark those. Over here on the next page, 7 and 8, do those. 9 and 10, circle those. for 9, it says reasoning. The question is, what mistake did Tom likely make? And he made a mistake. So I want you to put it in just a few words, what mistake it was that Tom made. All right, he simplified the expression, negative 2.6 plus a negative 5.4, and he got 2.8. Notice that he's adding 2 negatives. I don't know how he got that. All right, so 10, circle that one. 11, simplify the expression. This is kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier on in the lesson. I said you want to decide if it's easier to add, or I'm sorry, easier to convert both into decimals or both into fractions. Let's look at A, for example. We have 50 and 1/2 plus a negative 12.3. Well, I'm just going to change this 50 and 1/2 into a decimal. So I'll just put down 50.5. And I'm adding a negative. So here's my number line. 0. I'm starting at 50 and 1/2. Or 50.5, okay, and I'm adding a negative number. It's kind of like subtracting, so I'm just going to be going this direction. So I'm going to subtract 12.3. So I just converted the 50.5, or the 50 and 1/2, into a decimal. So 3 from 5 is 2, decimal comes straight down. Can't take 2 from 0, I have to borrow, that becomes a 4. So 10, subtracting 2 is 8, 1 from 4 is 3. We have a 38.2. And it's going to be a positive answer because when we look at the distance two numbers are from 0, the one that's the furthest from 0, that's the sign it's going to be. So in this case, it's just a positive 38.2. All right? So I want you to do B and C also. 12, 13, and 14, circle those. Turn to page 38. I want you to do 15, 16, 17, and 18A I want you to do. So scratch out B and C for 18, but I do want you to do A. And then 19 down below, assessment practice, part A, it says write an expression that represents the change in temperature for day 1. Well, this is what they're referencing here, day 1. Then it says show how you can use the properties of operations to find the value, and I scratched all that out. I'm not worried about any of that. I just want you to write that expression. Now, let me ask a question here. Let's see here, Mr. Proctor. And, oh, you didn't put your last name on this. Yeah. Oh, got to fix that. Anyways, when we're talking about an expression, what is it that I shouldn't see in what you write? Do you remember?
The answer.
Right, but more specifically, an equal sign. When we're talking about an expression, we're just talking about 3 plus a negative 2. You don't put an equal sign. All right? And then 20, circle that. I want you to do it. Questions, anybody? All right, I'm going to stop.